Exodus chapter 4. And I want to read, let's see here. Let's read verses 1 and 2. Exodus chapter 4. I want to read verses 1 and 2. And Moses answered and said, But behold, they will not believe me, nor hearken unto my voice. For they will say, The Lord hath not appeared unto thee. And the Lord said unto him, What is that in thine hand? And he said, A rod. Look at your neighbor and say, Neighbor, what's in your hand? That's what I want to talk about this morning. What's in your hand? The context of this passage revolves around the call of Moses to be the deliverer of Israel. He is around 80 years old. He is a fugitive, if you will, from Egypt. He lives with his father-in-law, Jethro, and keeps his sheep. He does not appear at this point in his life to be a likely choice for the ministry that God has in mind. So therefore, when the call of Moses comes, Moses gives every excuse possible he can think of to get out of what the Lord has for him to do. In Exodus 3:11 through 12, he says he doesn't feel worthy. In Exodus 3:13 and 14, he doesn't even know God's name. He says the people will not believe him. He says that he is not good with words. He says, send somebody else. And after all the excuses Moses makes, Moses goes to do what the Lord told him to do. Now, if you will, in the middle of this account, God asks Moses a question. That question is found in verse number 2 of our passage today. It is that question that I want to investigate this morning, because that question and the answer is there to it has importance for our lives, even for us right now. The question is rather a simple question. It is, what is in thine hand? Moses' answer is a rod. All he had in his hand that day was a simple shepherd's staff. To Moses, all he had in his hand was a dry, dead stick. That's all it was to him. But in the eyes of God, it was much more than that. And so as we look at this text today and see what Moses really had in his hand on that day, as we do that, let's take the time to look at our own lives to see the things we also carry in our hand. Depended on that rod every day that he lived. That rod identified Moses as a shepherd. And when people saw that rod in his hand, they would immediately know who he was. That rod also, people of God, represented all that Moses possessed. He did not even own the sheep that he kept. They belonged to his father-in-law, Jethro. All Moses possessed was that rod. It represented his life, his identity, and his livelihood. That rod was a constant reminder that he had never reached, here it is, his fullest potential in the Lord. 40 years earlier, God had moved on his heart to deliver Israel from Egypt. Some of us are holding pet sin. some hard feelings over things people have done or said to us. You're holding unforgiveness in your hand. You're holding the sorrows of life in your hand. You're holding feelings of inadequacy in your hand. Some of you are holding negativity in your hand. Some of you are holding talents in your hand, natural abilities and accomplishment. All of us got something in our hands that we're holding to that represent our personality. Of all these things, whether they are good or bad, identify us and control our lives, we come to depend on the things we hold in our hands, and we may even think we can't live, here we go, without them. They become an integral part of our lives. Like the shepherd, here it is, leans on a staff. Some of us lean on the things that we hold in our hand. We lean on the things that we hold in our hands, things like our past, our problems, our grudges, our abilities, and our talents. We live for those things, and we allow them to define our personality and control our destiny. What are you holding in your hand? We look at some of these other things we hold in our hands and believe that those things are all we will ever be. God, I saw in this text, will use Moses to teach us that we can rise above the things that we hold in our hand. We will see from Moses' episode that what we hold does not necessarily have to hold us. See, because some of us are carrying stuff, and in actuality, what you think you are carrying is really carrying you. Some of you can identify with what I'm saying today. Yeah, because you live some worldly experiences, and you've stepped out of the will of God, and you've done some things that you were not so proud of. You've been in places you were not so proud of. You've got hooked up with folk that tore you down. You got hooked up with people that was not for your good, but something on the inside kept it looked like life circumstances kept putting you back in the place where God can use you, and you felt the pull of God drawing you out of the world into the place of purpose and destiny. Is there anybody in the house that can lean on your neighbor and say, neighbor, I was pulled by God back into my purpose, back into my destiny. That's why I'm here. I'm here because I felt the pull of God on my life. Yes, I had messed up. Yes, I had a past. Yes, I was carrying stuff in my hand, but I felt the pull of God pull me into my purpose and my destiny.